Welcome to the HCI family of podcasts. We're your source for personal, professional, and organizational growth and development. We share our own original research, explore industry trends, and interview executives and thought leaders from across the globe. Join us for practitioner-oriented content around all things leadership, HR, talent management, organizational development, and change management. Maximize your personal and organizational potential with the HCI family of podcasts. Rich Braden and Tessa Forshaw, welcome to the conversation today.
Thank you. Great to be here.
It is a real pleasure to have you both with me. You're joining me from the coasts, West Coast, East Coast. I'm kind of in the middle, Salt Lake City area. It's a real pleasure to be gathered and to have an opportunity to talk about your forthcoming book, Be Innovation-ish. By Richard Braden and Tessa Forshaw. I love talking about all things innovation, and I think the title of your book is super fun. As we get started, I wanted to share Rich's and Tessa's bio with everybody. Rich Braden is founder of People Rocket LLC, a strategic innovation firm based in San Francisco with over 15 years of academic experience. Rich is recognized as a thought leader in design thinking, leadership, and innovation. He is a design educator, teacher at renowned institutions, including Harvard University, Stanford University, Aalto University, and London Business School, helping shape future leaders. I could say a lot more about Rich, but I'm going to pause there. As for Tessa, as co-founder of the Next Level Lab at Harvard University, Tessa specializes in using cognitive science to explore how people best work, learn, and innovate. She draws upon her academic research as a cognitive scientist and extensive background as a former designer at IDEO, Collab, and Accenture to turn the cognitive processes involved in design, creativity, and innovation into practical insights that can be applied in the flow of work. And again, I could say a whole lot more about Tessa and her background, her qualifications and expertise, but I'm going to pause, give you both a chance to highlight anything else you would like to highlight by way of your background or personal context.
Great, thanks. I'd say the things in between the lines are just sort of I started off as a software engineer, so I'm a long way from where I started, but there's a lot of creativity in places that you might not expect it, like engineering. And then I also had a side hustle doing improv for a dozen years in San Francisco.
Fun.
And so somewhere in the blend there is how I have come to do this work on creativity and innovation. And I've seen everybody, no matter what background, be incredibly creative.
Awesome. And Tessa?
Yeah, sure. I think just like Rich had a little bit of a walk in the park to get here through strategy consulting and into my own academic work. But as I've gone on that journey, something that's always really surprised me is how many people don't see themselves as creative, even when I see them to be incredibly creative and have incredible creative potential. And that really just inspired me to look at what is it that holds people back from engaging in creative problem solving? Why don't they think they're creative? Is everybody able to be a creative problem solver? How do we draw upon that? And that really brought Rich and I together to write this book.
I love it. I love it. And I really do believe like everyone is and can be a creative being, right? We're born creative. And you probably talk about this quite a bit, but like it kind of gets drummed out of us a lot through like the education system and like, the necessity of like shared norms and values and people coming together, to do things in similar ways and assimilate towards, the bigger group. There's societal, need for that, but it also kind of pounds creativity out of us that we naturally tend to have as young children. You just watch any child and they just very quickly allow their creativity to come out in a huge variety of ways. And I think over time also we tend to kind of buy into this narrative that creativity is, stand-up comedy. I think most people would say, yeah, that's creative, or music or visual art or things like that. People will say, oh, that's creative. But when it comes to decision making, when it comes to, throw out something like accounting, for example, I think most people are going to say, you can't be creative as an accountant, but I guarantee you can be very creative as an accountant. And there are many case studies pointing to that. Right. And so really we all can be creative, and it's about fostering that creativity within us to bring about innovation. And I think that's what every organization and every team wants, is they want that creativity, they want that innovation. And we often, just by virtue of the way we have our policies, practices, and procedures set up within organizations, we perhaps inadvertently stifle the very innovation we say we want, right?
Absolutely. Go ahead.
I was just to say, yeah, we talk a lot about this sort of headwind for creativity. In our book, we call it innovation hesitation.
Mm.
And really, Rich and I have seen three primary forms of that. And so one of them you absolutely alluded to, with this idea of wanting to be part of a group, wanting to conform. Really natural cognitive instinct. I mean, you see it in a newborn child, you see it especially in teenagers, you see it today in everybody. It keeps us safe and part of a group. And historically, that's so important, but also just like not that helpful when you're trying to be innovative. And the second component to that is the same with sort of risk taking. Really great reasons to avoid ambiguity, to avoid risks, to want to be cautious. But in the end, it's not a helpful reality for creative problem solving. So that is one of the core components that we call cognitive caution.
Mm-hmm.
And then the other two innovation hesitation components are the innovation methodology. So this idea that innovation happens in the city of the bridge behind you in Silicon Valley, in fancy buildings by fancy people following fancy processes, that cost lots of money to get certified in, and only they can do it. And so we've built this real sort of mythology around it. That means a lot of people don't really think it's for them. And that's such a shame. And then the third is something you also alluded to, which is the creativity gap. So really the gap between a person thinking that they're creative and thinking that somebody else is the creative one. So they're the musician. I'm not creative. I'm the accountant, to use your example. And what a lot of people don't know is that this sort of idea really comes from a neuromyth as well. This idea that we have a right brain and a left brain, and that one is responsible for creativity and analytical, you're one or the other, is completely untrue. It's been dispelled dozens and dozens and dozens of times by
Such
many
a dominant narrative, though, right?
Yeah, there's absolutely no evidence whatsoever to support it. And to be honest, really, really creative people use both sides of their brain. Really, really analytical people use both sides of their brain. And really, really creative people also are analytical. And really, really analytical people are
Right.
also creative. So no, they've come at studying that every which way, and there's no truth to it.
Awesome. Rich, anything you want to add?
I would just say this was really prevalent. We saw this in our students. We also saw this with clients that we deal with. It. This hesitation just stops people in their tracks. So if there are two kinds of people, it's not right and left brain. It's more and less hesitant. Once people start to break through and see the illusion of these three components, they're able to more easily access it once they start doing it as an adult. And remember, that 8-year-old that used to be so creative and do crafts is still in there. But if we apply creativity to solving problems, that's where you get a lot of boost in innovation. And that's what we're talking about, is how do you create a breakthrough solution for you? And if you happen to be in accounting, breakthrough might be making expense reports easier for everybody. It's not a moonshot. It's not a huge life-changing thing. But for the people involved, it is a great breakthrough, and it makes a big shift.
Yeah, I mean, that would change my life if someone could make my expense report
Absolutely.
easier.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Excellent. Yeah, that hesitancy, the risk aversion, right? It's, from a evolutionary psychological kind of perspective, of course that makes sense, right? That's like how our brain is hardwired, to be tribal, to avoid risk, and to try to make sense out of the senseless. That's like how we're made. But we're not like stuck by that. We're not trapped by that. And we can, just like young children can be super creative, we can also unlearn certain things or relearn certain things that will allow us again to just really exercise that muscle, right? And to just be engaged in that on a regular basis. All right, so that brings us to your book. So you have this new book, Be Innovation-ish. Tell me a little bit about why this book, why now? What is it about this book that you just felt like you had to get it out there?
I think it started with those students coming in and saying all that innovation hesitation. And many of them would bring in, well, at my company or in this class, I learned this approach. I learned one that is used at another consulting firm or at a design firm or at this university in their design program, design thinking, agile. There's so many out there. As they kept bringing them to us, we would take a look at them, try to help them incorporate that into their learning. And they started to look very similar. And we had a suspicion, are these really getting at the same thing? So we started collecting more and more. We looked at them more deeply. We ended up coding over 80 different frameworks.
Mm.
And when you distill them all down, what really is going on is they have designed a set of steps or a checklist that is a forcing function to try to get you to adopt a different mindset. And there are only 6 mindsets in that whole set. So instead of following a process or a recipe that those methodologies all follow, we decided to teach the mindsets. And that's sort of where it started of look at the problem from different ways, a mindset of interactions where you go out and learn from other people in the world. Mine that for some insights with an insights mindset. And so if you take those 6 and you're following them, whatever path you take, whatever set of steps, whether it's complete or not, is giving you more innovation. And so that was the big change, I think, in the approach to it is you don't have to follow some scheme or diagram or set of steps that gets you there. And I think that's a lot of the problem with it. There are many articles that say, this methodology doesn't work, brainstorming doesn't work, or design thinking doesn't work. And when you read that article, what they're describing, of course, it doesn't work. Because you're just following a set of steps blindly, as opposed to stopping to choose, this is how I need to move forward now with this project.
A great analogy that we often use when we're talking about this with students and has made it into the book is this idea of if I gave you a map and I said to you, Jonathan, this is the best map ever. When I was on my recent holiday, it was so good. I loved it. I use it every day. Do you want to use my map? You would be like, sure, yeah, give me the map. And then you get the map and you open it up and you're on your holiday. And instead of being in New York City where the map is, you're standing in the middle of Yosemite National Park. And so obviously that map doesn't work for you. And so rather than needing another map or even a better map, we sort of started to look at, well, actually, how could we make better navigators? And how can we stop trying to externalize the actual act of creative problem solving to the process and instead put it back inside the humans, inside the people solving it. And so through this notion of mindsets and the research on mindsets, we know that by intentionally changing your mindset, you change what you pay attention to, you change what you see and notice, you change what decisions you make, what choices you make, what actions you take.
Yeah.
I'll say to my students, the best way to think about a mindset is if you've ever been to Costco with I have 20 minutes and I have to go in and out mindset, your experience of Costco is phenomenally different than if you have 2 hours to kill that afternoon and you go in with a leisurely pace. The route you take, the choices you make, where you stop, what line you go in, if you get a trolley or a bus, like all of those things, those decisions change. And that is the power of a mindset.
I love that.
They also cost a significant difference with those 2 different mindsets. The amount of resources you invest actually changes as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love the map example that you gave. And actually, at first, I thought you were going a slightly different direction. I was like, okay, let's say they even are going to New York City. You have the map, all the places you went. They're in New York City. They open up their map. Okay, are they actually in New York City? Are they actually enjoying their experience and present in New York City? Or are they like in the map, right? Are they just following your checklist of all the things to do? And we both know, we all know that that's like 2 totally different types of experiences, right? And so it's no wonder if you're just like blindly following a process and checking things off as you go, of course, that's not going to be the same fundamental kind of approach towards creativity and innovation as if when you internalize it and you can actually then just be in that moment and create and innovate, right?
Yeah, and
Absolutely.
we also talk about metacognition as a component of our framework in the book. So it's really important for you to have these mindsets, but the kind of secret sauce, so to speak, of how you think about when to apply them and what to do is by being metacognitive, which I think is highlighted perfectly in that illustration of I can be in New York City with a map of New York City, right? So let's say somehow I found the right map and I'm standing in the right place. If I'm just going through somebody else's map and checking it off, am I seeing what I want to see? Am I tasting what I want to taste? Am I missing opportunities? Am I having my experience that's truthful and authentic to me and what I need? No. But if instead I am being really metacognitive and asking myself, how am I feeling today? What are my goals for today? What do I think will help me achieve those goals? If I do X, what do I expect to happen? Let's go find out. How did that go? And if I'm using that process of metacognition in action, we call it, to guide what design and creative problem solving steps I'm taking next and next and next, then you're going to get a much more innovation-ish outcome.
Yeah. Well, and just not to belabor the New York City example, but the first time as an adult, the first time I was in New York, as a young adult was, with a choir tour, actually. So I was with a whole bunch, like a huge group of people, right? And it's a tour. So like we had a tour agency, that like gave us an agenda, gave us an itinerary, and we did have structured things, right? Well, thankfully, we also had unstructured time too. And the structured time was great, and we got to perform at cathedrals, and we got to do all these cool things, right? And it was wonderful. But what I loved about that trip was the unstructured time. And honestly, like the 2 hours I had to just wander around Central Park, and decide what I wanted to do, what I wanted to see, jump on a bike and ride around, sit down and sketch something. Like those were the moments that were really the most meaningful and fulfilling to me, and creative, and the opportunities I had to just really unleash a bit, right? And that's even being there for a choir tour, which is a creative thing, right? Like the rest of the trip was so structured that having some unstructured time allowed, for me to exercise that creativity muscle.
And then being present with that, you got to choose the actions, the exhibits, the thing that you wanted to do next that was going to help benefit you and your experience. And so that's the third component. So what we've been talking about is the mindsets. Tess brought in metacognition. That's all in service of choosing what we call the moves. And these are the small actions you take. For the next week, I'm going to do interviews with potential users of my product. That would be a move. It's small, it's contained, but it's an action you take. You're choosing those actions using metacognition as opposed to the prescribed checklist we talked about before. The second thing is there are lots of great design moves. There are all kinds of classes. You can go out and you can learn as many as you want. You can get all certificates you want, but you don't need to because you already have huge life experience. You have an education in something, whether it's a trade, it's a degree, it's a hobby. You've learned skills, and so you have moves. If you go from a mindset, you're using metacognition to decide, and you pull a move from your past and your experience, that now is an innovation-ish move because you're using it in service of innovation, and that's all it takes. So for an example is we had a student who had a family therapy background. And we got to a certain point where we were looking at some data from interviews, and she said, well, this is just family systems mapping. And we said, yes, you should use that. That's a great tool. What is it? Because we didn't know what she was talking about. But for her, it was powerful because she was familiar, she could use it, and she could share those results with her team. And so that became an innovation-ish move for her. I dare say you won't see that move taught in a design class anytime soon. But for her, it was that. We've had economists, we have had people from all different backgrounds bringing in interesting tools. So you don't have to go do a lot of new training or retraining to engage in being innovation-ish. And I think that's the differentiation. When people think innovation, they think a few stock things. And with us, we're saying this is open to anything. Grab any book, anything you see online, and you can incorporate it into your practice.
Yeah, and I like the cross-pollination aspect of what you're just describing, right? Like Sometimes innovation truly is like you're like Isaac Newton or you're Einstein or something, and you're like truly coming up with something revolutionary, right? That is innovation. But most of the innovations that occur in our day-to-day lives at most businesses and society as a whole, it's just the cross-pollination of ideas. And so you can take something disparate ideas from two totally different places, bring them together, and then all of a sudden you have some new breakthrough, some new process is better, or a system is better, or whatever, right? You have some new product or service that's just exactly what the market needs. And that cross-pollination is what brings that together. So purposefully, bringing in your own past experience, aligning yourself with other folks that have, diverse backgrounds and diverse past experiences, that's going to lead to more creativity. There's a reason why, diverse groups over and over and over again tend to perform better at creative and innovative tasks, if they can lean into that, right, and leverage that.
It's interesting. Rich and I were recently invited to NEOM, which is in Saudi Arabia. You might have heard of the Line, the big vertical, massive city net zero ambition moonshot, or, potentially even like out of the universe shot that they're taking on, Mars shot, maybe, they're taking on. What was so interesting to me about that experience of going there was it felt on the outside, like you said, like Einstein or Edison, like this massive, massive revolutionary, transformative idea innovation. And if it is to be successful, like, of course it would be. However, what we learned when we got there and were so struck by was the amount of everyday little innovations that needed to happen in order for that big innovation to actually come off. So, for example, the Line is in one of the windiest places on Earth, and they have to lift, hundreds of meters wide of concrete, like, hundreds of meters in the air. That's really hard on the best of days. But when you're dealing with the windiest place on Earth, that becomes really challenging. And so they're making innovations in small ways, in terms of construction materials, in jacking equipment, in all of these different things that we sort of heard about while we were going along. So much so that they have stood up an entire department that sort of coordinates all of these jump shot, roof shot level innovations that are in facilitation or service of getting to this big one. And I think, Velcro is a great example of that. We've seen this with NASA in history as well. There are so many of these jump shot, roof shot innovations that ultimately facilitate us getting to the literal moonshot in that case. And so I was so struck by that idea that these big moonshots actually nearly always are not this like light bulb massive thing, but are a series of incremental improvements. And yet we still teach it in so many cases, and there's still so many books and so much in the zeitgeist that innovation has to be this like novel revolutionary thing, when actually the way you get there is never just by coming up with that and doing it by itself.
I think the other aspect of what you said is each one of those individual lone geniuses that we hear about was in conversation with a huge number of colleagues, have huge teams, even the Steve Jobs, the Elon Musk, all of those people have incredibly dedicated, brilliant teams under them, and they become more orchestrator than inventor in those cases. Not to diminish their impact or their results, but they all have a team around them. And one thing that is true is innovation is a team sport. It requires collaboration because everyone shares, and I think you were alluding to this, they each have a different perspective. When you combine those, you get the aggregated perspectives of all those people, that distributed cognition of everyone involved. And that's always going to be more powerful than any single individual.
I love it. I love it. Well, Rich and Tessa, this has just been a fantastic, fascinating conversation. I know we've really only scratched the surface of what is covered in your book, but all the more reason why people need to run out and go get your book. As we start to wrap up today, I just wanted to give you a chance to share with the audience how they can connect with you, find out more about your work, where they can find your book, and then give us the final word for today.
Great. Well, you can get the book anywhere books are sold. So online at Amazon and Target and Barnes and Noble and many, many independent booksellers. And in local bookshops, you can go in as well. It's distributed everywhere in the US, in Australia, and the United Kingdom for now, and will roll out to others upcoming. You can also catch up with us we have Substack, substack.innovationish.com, and we will be producing content there that is related in some of the background stories and some of the science as well. And then I think LinkedIn.
Yeah, absolutely. Follow both of us on LinkedIn. Each of us share sort of different. I tend to share more of the cognitive science tidbits, and Rich is really great at sharing practical everyday tips and cases and applied things that you can go out and do. And so, both of us is a good mix.
And I would say you got to follow the cartoons and illustrations that Tess does are just brilliant. She is gifted at making cognitive science, which is very complex, very simple that everyone can understand.
You mean I'm gifted at using AI to do that?
Your concepts.
Well, thank you both. This has just been a real pleasure. I encourage the audience to reach out, to get connected, find out more about what Rich and Tessa can do for you. Check out the book. And as always, I hope everyone can stay healthy and safe. They can find meaning and purpose at work each and every day. And I hope you all have a great week. Thanks for joining us for this episode of the podcast. We hope you stay healthy and safe, and please join us again soon.